everyone, welcome back to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I'm bringing you my top 10 books of 2020. I've got my camera at an angle today because it's snowing outside and it looks very pretty, so I thought I would film towards the window so you can watch the gentle snow falling down. Okay, so I have 10 books to talk to you about which are my top 10 from last year. My top 10 favourites from 2020. They are a mixture of things because I didn't read enough to be able to give you like a top 10 fiction, a top 10 non-fiction. So by booktube standards, my reading is slow. So I only finished, I think it was like 48 books last year. I'm going to do a separate video talking about my stats and reading goals for this year. But yeah, they're just, and also it was kind of a mediocre reading year for me. And also because of what was last year, my reading was all over the place. And so I just didn't feel engaged in a lot of those books. So yeah, these are the top 10. The ones that I enjoyed the most, that I connected with the most, that I thought were the most important. So we've got a mixture of fiction, non-fiction and poetry. Starting off with these aren't in any kind of order apart from maybe like the top 5. So number 10 is Flesh by Mary Jean Chan. This was a poetry collection I read a while ago, and it's the only poetry collection on here because it was my favourite one of the year. It is a collection that I found really accessible, really easy to read, and I connected with the poems about disconnected family. So they are poems that look at different identities in terms of belonging and nationality. Mary Jean Chan is, I think she's from Hong Kong. So some of her poems, I've talked about this in a previous video, some of her poems contain Chinese characters, and she talks about the difficult relationships with her mother and her family because of her queer identity not being accepted by her family. And I just really loved it. I thought it was a fabulous collection. I would love for everybody to read it, and that is why it's on my top 10. I read a library copy, so I don't have a physical copy, which is why I put the picture in here. But I would like to get my own copy because one of those collections I think I do want to go back to. Okay, so that was number 10. Number 9, interestingly, is a classic. It is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm putting this on my top 10 because it took me a long time to read. I was listening to it on audio. Just really enjoyed the experience of it. I think because it was quite a comforting read at a difficult time. I really love Elizabeth Gaskell's writing style. It's very easy for a classic. It's very accessible. I just love the story. I love the characters. Molly Gibson, hard to relate Molly Gibson in the first section of the book. And yeah, I just loved everything about it. I think it's the first Elizabeth Gaskell I've read, so I will definitely come back to more of her work. Would highly recommend, even though it cuts off at the end because it's an unfinished novel. Still fabulous. Very much enjoyed it. Okay, then I have got one to hold up. Number 9, I've got White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. I read this at the beginning of the year. It was a book club choice, my book club choice. And I love Oyeyemi's writing. I know she's a bit of a Marmite author because some of her stuff is bonkers, and this is no exception. This is great for this time of year, for snow. It's weird. It's a weird story, but I keep thinking about it. And if I think I read this in January, to keep thinking about it now, I think that's the marker of a good book that stays with you because it keeps coming up in my mind. So this is the story of a house, basically, a house that does not want to let go of the inhabitants, particularly the female line of this family. I've even forgotten the character's name. Miranda Silva is our protagonist, and this is about the relationship between her and her family, and particularly the female line of the family, and the house being very possessive of them. It is creepy. It is a creepy read. And I love that. It's kind of a little bit gothic. There's some very interesting themes in here about kind of racism and white supremacy, but it's very subtly done, very subtle, and it's just fantastic. Again, I'd highly recommend her writing, but she's not for everybody. The one I want to get to next is Gingerbread, so that's on my list. I just love this. I think it's one that I definitely reread as well, and I don't often reread. Okay, then I have another one that was a library book that I've taken back. Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks. This was a fantastic book, and it was very short. It's again very accessible. It is about feminism and how it shouldn't be seen exclusively as a theory or a practice for women, because it is important for everybody. And I love this book because, again, I've mentioned this. I think I'll link my video in the description box below where I talked about it. Some of the things that she talked about, just even though, like, I'm a feminist, I know feminist theory, I've studied it throughout my degrees, I'm writing about it for my PhD. But the way she spoke about the patriarchy as damaging to everybody in terms of men as well, and children, and the power structures that perpetuate those patriarchal constructs of dominance, and how it's damaging to children, I found particularly enlightening. So would highly recommend that. Again, it's a very small book, won't take you long to read, and it will blow your mind. Okay, next one I do have, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. I read this kind of at the beginning of the year, I think, around the time that the Black Lives Matter protests were happening. And I know this isn't new, but obviously it was very pertinent. And I found this, again, a very accessible read, very helpful for me to understand things that I have chosen to ignore as a white person, because I have that privilege to ignore them. And it helped me engage with, like, obviously what was going on in the world, and gave me a really good grounding for what I need to do as a white person to be better, to be an ally. I know some people don't like that term, but that's what I'm trying to do. And this has, like, really helped me to, particularly in terms of feminism, like the problem with feminism being white feminism, and not including the black female experience, and so that was really helpful as well. One of the things that I have done, like, I know I was going to make a separate video about this, but I don't know, in terms of keeping on track with supporting Black Lives Matter, I'm part of a working group at my job, my main day job. The company that I work for, actually, like, fair play to them, they set up several working groups around Black Lives Matter, and I'm part of the training and development group. So this has really helped feed into that, where we are trying to bring in black-led training of, external providers, and how we're trying to hold difficult conversations within our business, which is very white dominated at all levels, and that's been really interesting. And this has kind of been my foundation text for approaching people that maybe aren't on board with it. I've had some kind of backlash against me as a white person talking about Black Lives Matter. Fair enough, I understand that, but we are a very white company, so that's one of the issues. So this has been really helpful for me in engaging with practice going forward to support Black Lives Matter, and it's just like a foundational text. If you haven't read it, go read it. Okay, now into the top 5, which are all fiction, and I have all of them but one. So number 5, my top favourite, was The Mercies by Kieran Millward Hargrave. I listened to this on audio. I got this physical copy from my lovely friend Kat for Christmas or Yollabokaflod. So I'm really pleased I have a physical copy, because I loved this on audio, and I'm glad I listened to it on audio first, because there are some names in here that I would not know how to pronounce, and if I'd read them I would have said them completely wrong. So I'm glad I've got that in my head of like names and certain words and how they're pronounced. So this is basically the story of a very remote village in, I've even forgotten the place, because last time I said it was Iceland. It's not Iceland, it's in Norway. Norwegian island of Vardø. There is a strange accident on Christmas Eve 1617. All the men are out fishing and they all get killed by a storm. So the story is about the aftermath of that incident, the women who survive, how they pull together as a community, and the fact that women living alone apparently is a terrible thing. And so these religious men swoop in to try and control them, and it turns into witch trials, of course, because strong women are always witches, according to history. I love this book. I love her writing style. It was very atmospheric. If you want something to read in this lovely weather, go for this, because it's just beautiful. It really does bring the atmosphere of a very cold place and the remoteness, and it makes the connection between our two characters all the more sweet. So there is like a queer love story in here, which is just fabulous, and like without any sex scene. I think there might be a sex scene here, but the most erotic thing I've ever read in this book. Fantastic. It is kind of a little bit heartbreaking, but would highly recommend this. Also, what else have I read by her? Oh no, I have The Deathless Girls on my shelf that I want to get to next. I love her writing. Fabulous. Okay, then number 4 we have Wakenhurst by Michelle Paver. Another gothic spooky tale. This is set in Edwardian Suffolk, yes, around this manor house. It is a father and daughter relationship where the father is going slightly mad. He's obsessed with his work, like this research into, I think it's like some kind of weird spiritualist woman. He's got this old text of hers, and there's some creepy shenanigans going on in the village where they're from. Again, the atmosphere in here is fantastic. It's set in Fenland, so there's the is it a monster? Isn't it a monster kind of deal? It was really gripping. It's a page turner. I just wanted to find out what happened. I loved our main character, Maud. She's very young, and she's kind of fighting the patriarchy because all of the men around her just dismiss her concerns, even though her dad is legit going mental. So yes, this was fantastic. And again, Michelle Paver, I think, is going to be one of those authors that I come back to, because I love anything spooky, I love gothic, I love ghost stories, and I think that's what she writes. So we're very much excited about getting to more of her work this year. Right, then we have a book that I don't have because it was a library copy. It is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. This book blew my mind. Okay, I think it's young adult or children's. It is about a main character, Jam, who's one of my most favourite protagonists ever. Jam is a trans girl, and I think she's also mute. She communicates by sign language, I think. This book is just full of amazing representation. So we have non-binary representation, queer relationships. We have disability rep. One of the best characters is this librarian guy, and he's a wheelchair user, and he's just the best. I love the way he treats Jam, and it's just fantastic. So sorry, I haven't talked about what this book is about. This book is about Jam's encounter with a creature that comes out of one of her mother's paintings, which is actually, for a children's book, one of the most scary things I've ever read. I was like what is this creature? And the creature has come to hunt monsters, as in bad people. So it's kind of, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to wobble you. It's set in a utopian kind of society where no bad things exist, no crime, no monsters. But the creature has come out of the painting to hunt down a monster. So, yeah, that's the basic plot line of Jam and this creature going on the hunt for a monster in their town. Trigger warning for, like, this book deals with some dark stuff. It deals with child abuse, but again, it's so cleverly done, it's so deftly done, and it's subtle. Yeah, like as an adult reader, you know what's happening, but it's not overbearing, it's not too much, it's just fantastic. It's something like I've never read before. I just loved the writing style. So there's another book on my TBR, which is The Death of Vivek Oji. That's one that I want to get to very soon, because yeah, just the style of writing just blew me away. And yeah, for a kid's book, man alive, it was great. Would highly recommend that, but it is a bit scary. Okay, now we have my top 2, which it was a tie, and maybe I would change my mind if I was doing this on a different day, but rather controversially, number 2 is my favourite author, Ali Smith, with Summer. This is the final of the seasonal quartet. It is the end, and it wraps things up, and we meet characters that we've met in autumn and winter, and I think spring. I'm due a reread of spring. But this, I don't know where it sits in my favourite of the quartet. I still haven't digested it all. Again, with Ali Smith, it's not the plot, it's about reading the now. So this was published in 2020. It talks about 2020. It talks about the pandemic. It talks about Black Lives Matter. It talks about the farce that is Brexit and the corrupt political situation in Britain. But at the heart of it is a story of family and connections. So we have Daniel and Elizabeth from Autumn. Daniel was my favourite character out of this quartet. And we go back to him. He's very old now, and he's being looked after by Elizabeth. And we flash back to his memories of when he was much younger, living in Germany right before the war. And the relationship with his sister, which is mirrored in the other family in here, the Greenlaws. Sasha and Robert are brother and sister who have a very antagonistic relationship. They're very different. And those two brother-sister relationships kind of feed in and out of each other, and it's just fantastic. I'm always at a loss with describing Ali Smith, because there is so much in these books, and I'm writing about it now for my PhD. There's just, and I can't stop, because there's so much to unpack. There's so many themes, as well as, you know, talking about what's happening now, our position in the world, how we relate to each other through narratives and stories, how we relate to time. And there's a lot of intertextuality, because she is riffing off of Dickens and Shakespeare. There's always artists mentioned in each book. In this one, I think it's the film director. Lorenzo Mazzetti is the name of the film director. Yeah, so there's just a lot going on in here, and you can't, like, I always feel like you can't always take everything in with Ali Smith, because there's so much. There'll be like little narratives where she'll go off into the story of a child lost in the snow, and again, we're drawn back to other narratives, other stories. So it's riffing off of Cymbeline and The Haunted Man. There's just so much to unpack in here, which is why they do really well for like close readings, which is why I'm studying them for my PhD. But also, you can just enjoy them as a regular story, because yeah, it's not all about plot, but her characters are so well drawn, and it's just fun to read. Like, even though she's dealing with some dark stuff like Brexit and the shooting of MPs and refugees being washed up dead on the beach. Her humour just pervades every page of the text, and she's just a fantastic writer. I love her. So this is my number 2, which, you know, is a big deal for me to put Ali Smith number 2. What on earth could have peaked it to number 1? It's Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. Maybe because I read this last in December. It was my last read of 2020. But this was just, I don't know, it was just fantastic. I know everyone's talked about it. It's got a lot of hype. Quite right, because it is an amazing novel. I love Maggie O'Farrell's writing style. I love this story. I love Agnes, the main character. And I love the way that she built the narrative up, because you know Hamlet, Shakespeare's son, is going to die. And yes, it is traumatic when you're having to witness and yes, go through this grief for her son. But like I said before in my previous video, the thing that really got me was the way that it split her and Shakespeare apart, even though they were living apart and didn't have much of a relationship anyway, because he's in London being all famous and she's just living in the countryside, not knowing anything about how rich they are. I just love her character. I love the way she is a green witch, effectively. She knows remedies. She can see things about people. She's got second sight. She can heal people. And I love that. I thought that was fantastic. She's just such a wonderful character. And the thing I didn't talk about in my last video on this was the little section that she put in about how the plague got to Stratford-upon-Avon, got to her son and daughter. So both Hamlet and Judith are affected by the plague. They both suffer from it. And there's a small section in here about the fleas that carry the plague and how they've travelled from Europe all the way to how they get to their town. And that piece of writing was just stunning. It's like you're almost willing it not to happen. But obviously you know the outcome. But it was just phenomenal writing. So beautifully done. I just loved it. I loved it so much. And again, I'm not a rereader. I want to reread this already. So yes, this is my favourite book of 2020 and I'm so glad I read it, because like I say, I had a bit of a mediocre reading year. Only 10 books made it to be my favourite. So, and this, I'm so pleased I read it. It was fantastic. So there you go. That is my top 10 of 2020. Tell me how you feel about these books. If you've read them, do you want to read them? Talk to me in the comments below. What was your favourite of 2020? I know for a lot of people it was this. And I am going to be talking to you very soon about, like I said, my stats, what I read in 2020 and what I want to do this year and what I want to do differently. So I will speak to you very soon in another video. Bye.